What's up, Warriors fans, and welcome back to Warriors Latest. As always, I am your host, Max Arizin. A big thanks to all you guys for tuning in, liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell, as I do post new Warriors videos daily, and it does help the channel continue to grow as the season moves along. And also, for a quick update, we are now available on wherever you get your podcasts via apps or things like that. So we're available on Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts. So if you can't catch us on YouTube, feel free to listen to Warriors Latest on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and rate us a good 5 stars so we can continue trending in the right direction. Now, in terms of trending in the right direction, the one thing I did like coming out of the news, the rumor mill, the news bracket, whatever you want to call it, is the fact that the NBA is finally going to vote on anti-tanking measures. Now, I've looked over these measures. There are 3 proposals. Some are good, some are bad, but let's go through them one at a time. Now, this is proposal number 1. The draft lottery would expand from 14 teams to 18, adding the 7th and 8th seeds in each conference. The draft odds would be flattened for the bottom 10 teams, giving them an 8% chance at the number 1 overall pick. The remaining 20% odds for the top pick would be spread out in descending order for the remaining 8 teams within that group. The worst team, i.e. the 11th worst overall, would have the most favorable odds. All 18 picks would be drawn via lottery. Now, I do like that idea out of all 3 of them. The problem is that, all right, we look at it, and basically the top 8 teams get the best lottery odds, which aren't exactly that good, but it's just they're marginally better than the last 10 teams. So I like the idea of it. I like that. However, as we've seen in previous years, look, the 7th and 8th team, or the 7th and 8th seed, based off of matchups, can beat their number 1 and number 2 counterpart. We look at what happened with the Warriors last year. They were the 7th seed. They beat the Rockets handily in a 7-game series. And we saw what the Miami Heat did against the Milwaukee Bucks in their first round series a couple years ago when they went all the way to the NBA Finals. And it's not like an 8th seed can't beat a 1 seed if that 8th seed has the 1 seed's number. There are plenty of times that does happen in the NBA. And what would be tough to swallow is the fact it's like, all right, you have a 7th or an 8th seed. They win their first round game, and then they make the conference finals, and voila, they've won the top overall pick because you know what? 8% isn't that bad lottery odds. You've got an 8% chance compared to the rest of the team. So 8% isn't that bad. Yes, there are going to be top teams that are in the top 5, and I get that, but 8% is a little high for a team that could potentially go to the conference finals. I mean, if I remember a few years ago, I want to say it was 2023, or I believe it was the first time the Timberwolves made it to the conference finals. I believe they were a 7th seed. So it's not that surprising. And then to see them potentially win the NBA draft lottery with an 8% odds, which isn't the worst, it's going to be a tough pill to swallow. And I know that the entire board of governors or the owners, whatever you want to call them, they know this scenario is a real possibility because of how parity has really become the norm in the league. Now, it's tough, but it is the best solution because you know what? Doing better still gets you decent odds than doing worse. And going for the playoffs, it's like, all right, I still get an 8% chance at getting the top pick. I can live with that. Now, yes, you do get better odds if you bottom out, but I think because of that, less teams will bottom out because let's be honest, a lot of the times, especially over the last few years, the worst team has rarely, if ever, gotten that number 1 overall pick. And with the talent that's constantly coming out, it's like, yes, there is a lot of young freshman talent. But as we've seen year after year after year, that freshman talent does take a lot of time to develop. And some of these teams don't want that time. I mean, some of these teams, they need a star now, and a lot of these guys aren't going to become immediate stars that lead them to the playoffs, because the playoffs right now are where the money's at. Now, you look at teams like the Blazers, you look at teams like the Kings, you look at teams like the Wizards, they're actually trying to get better. We saw the Wizards, even though they did, let's be honest, they did tank a little bit to keep their first round pick from going to the Knicks this year. They are looking to get better, bringing in Trae Young, bringing in Anthony Davis. They are going to use that pick to at least draft an additional young guy before they go for, say, the play-in games next year. And you know what? They did lose 2 second-round picks to the Knicks, which are going to be higher picks. But I do think this is going to prevent a lot of tanking. Now, this is the second proposal. The draft lottery would expand from 14 teams to 22 teams, incorporating non-playoff teams and the teams eliminated in the playoffs in the first round. Teams' lottery odds would be determined based off their records over the previous 2 seasons. For instance, a team that won 45 games one year and then 25 the next would be slotted in the lottery as a 35-win team. Okay. A minimum win floor would be implemented if the floor were to be set at 20 wins. For example, a team that went 15-67 in a season would be considered to have gone 20-62 for lottery purposes. All right, that's a little confusing. The top 4 spots would be drawn via lottery like the current system. Yeah, this proposal just is very confusing and makes zero sense. And just expanding from 14 to all the teams that lose in the first round, like what if what if a number 1 seed just gets bounced, say the way Milwaukee did a couple years ago, say the way the Mavericks did when Dirk won MVP. They just had a bad series because the 8th seed had their number. And next thing you know, best team in the league, boom, they get the top pick. Now, I do get it that it's like, all right, there are ways to prevent that, but this is just way too confusing, and I'm not buying it. It's just, what is going on with this? Now, this is the third proposal. The draft lottery would expand from 14 teams to 18 teams, adding the 7th and 8th seeds in each conference. Okay. The bottom 5 teams would each have the same odds for the number 1 overall pick. Interesting. That's an interesting. So you can't, bottoming out really doesn't do anything for you. So I like that. With each team's odds descending from there, starting with the 6th worst team and then going back. All right. The top 5 spots would be drawn via lottery. Okay. I'm not a big fan of that. And then a separate lottery would be determined for the remaining 13 teams. I don't like that because I think that's a real deal breaker. Just in general, and that I believe all right, let's see. The last thing they say is the bottom 5 teams will be prohibited from falling past the 10th in the draft order. Now, I'm not a big fan of that because it basically says, okay, if you're outside of the bottom 5, you can't get the number 1 overall pick. So it sounds like it's sort of promoting tanking with this proposal. Now, out of all of these, tanking is a real issue, but the first proposal is easily the best one because it's flattening the lottery odds. And when you're flattening the lottery odds, you're just disincentivizing tanking. Because you know what? If all other teams have a solid 8% chance at getting the top pick, those are decent odds. Right now, the top 3 teams have a 14% chance at getting the top pick. That's only a 6% chance difference, and it really hasn't worked out in bottoming out teams' favorites. Yes, most of the time those teams have never fallen out of the top 4. But it's always a team outside of that usually gets the top pick more often than not. So I do like the first proposal. I think that is the best one to vote on in terms of just finding ways to get tanking just as a thing in the past. And I understand teams like tanking or bottoming out because it is the most efficient way to build a roster and build a team to become a championship contender. But you got to remember, it's not just the talent that you get, it's how you develop the talent. Look at Zion Williamson, for example. He was probably the most storied prospect since LeBron, and he's just completely busted out. He, in his 7 years in the league, he's made 2 All-Star teams and has had serious trouble staying healthy. So getting a top pick does not guarantee you are going to be instantly become a playoff contender or even a championship contender. There needs to be more of a focus on how teams develop their players and how the league can help with that player development, whether that be just moving things around in the G League, finding ways to sort of promote player development for all 30 teams that probably will eventually be 32, but they have to find ways to draft these guys and get them to get better. And I'm not sure how you do that. Well, there is one way I think of. It's to institute say the 3-and-out rule, similar to baseball, whereas you could come like you can go into the G League for a year, come straight out of the G League, or you could go to college for 3 years, and then after 3 years, you come into the draft, because it's starting to show that the upperclassmen are really the players that are making an instant impact with their team right after they're drafted. So it's worth, like, the first proposal is great, but it's also worth looking into just reinstituting the age rule in terms of the NBA draft and maybe fiddling around with there. But you know what? We'll see what happens May 28th of next month, May 28th, and let's see if any of the new proposals actually stick. Now, outside of the tanking news, the frustration that I've been feeling regarding the Warriors has been these bad wins and these tough losses. Now, we saw the tough loss they took against the Rockets. Pods just brain dead move. Didn't set the double screen with Draymond. Didn't allow Steph to get open to win that game. And it was just tough to take. Now, going on to the Kings game, that was annoying because this is the Kings we're dealing with. And when you're playing the Kings, you're supposed to blow them out. You're not supposed to beat them only by 5 points. You need to blow them out by at least 20. This is a team that is intentionally bottoming out to get a better draft pick because, you know what? They've got nothing going for them. They need to get rid of DeMar DeRozan. They need to get rid of Domantas Sabonis. And they need to get rid of Zach LaVine to sort of create cap space and create financial flexibility. Yet they are stuck just where they are, and the Warriors couldn't do anything about that. They need games like these to be momentum builders, and this was not a momentum builder as it was a back-and-forth game to which the Warriors only won by 5. So I'm kind of tired of this, and it really is just it's really telegraphing where the rest of the Warriors season is going to go, and I don't like it. But again, we did get some more news on what Giannis is doing. And again, it's up in the air, and it's frustrating to see. First, we say, ownership and Giannis have a handshake agreement to trade him at the deadline, if not by the summer. Now John Horst is saying, hey, we don't have a decision on Giannis. We don't know what we're going to do. Literally, if you're going to be a good team and trade away your star player, just go straight forward and do it. Be honest with the people. Be honest with the media. Look, you want it to be a clean breakup. You don't want things to get ugly. Odds are he's not going to sign an extension as much as he does love Milwaukee. Because at this point in his career, he's in his 30s. He still wants more titles, and he's not going to win them in Milwaukee. Look, they tried and failed to win one with Dame Lillard. It did not work out. They're already looking to fire their coach. And they're just looking for a full reset since they own none of their first-round picks up until, I believe it's 2029 or 2030, and it's bad. But at least on the bright side, they do have control over their pick this year because the Pelicans are doing worse than they are in terms of the standings, and odds are that swap isn't going to take effect, and Atlanta is just going to keep the Pelicans pick. But it's just tough to watch. Now, this is where the Warriors come in, and they're going to take full advantage of this situation by giving the Bucks their 5 draft picks along with whatever cap filler they desire for Giannis, and it's going to be a very great situation for them. They're going to bring him back. They're going to bring him over. Yes, you're sending away 5 first-round picks, but you're also getting back a guy who's going to extend Steph's career maybe 2, 3, even 4 years because of how Steph could be used in the future. He's going to take a lot of attention away from Steph as well as the double teams, create opportunities for other players, and it's just going to go really well because let's be honest. The Warriors haven't exactly been the best with drafting their first round picks. Their bread and butter is drafting in the late first round and mostly in the second round. And I think after the last few years, they've realized they want to draft sure things in that second round, guys who can contribute, like Will Richard, like Quentin Post, like Guy Santos, rather than take a risk on a high raw freshman that they could develop. And let's be honest, we saw how that went with James Wiseman and with Jonathan Kuminga. I don't think we're in the mood to see that again. Let's just extend the window for Steph Curry and move on from there. But you know what? Bucks may flip-flop, but we know where they're going. But bottom line is, it's frustrating to see that after the game versus the Kings, we have the Laker game tonight. We know where this season is going, and it's a telegraphed ending in Portland when the Warriors do eventually lose against the Trailblazers. Now, I may be wrong. I'm not going to lie. I may be wrong. Maybe the Warriors do end up winning back-to-back play-in games, and next thing you know, they're the 8th seed. But I'm not counting on it. If you can't beat the Kings by double digits on your own floor, I'm not confident you're going to be able to beat a team that has had your number for the majority of the season on the road. And that's what the Blazers are. Yes, the Warriors have had their number in the playoffs many years in the past, but this ain't that same Warriors team, and it's tough to watch, and it's better to just look towards the offseason than really worry about the upcoming games. Yes, Steph is back. Maybe his magic will surprise you, but I'm not too confident. But on the bright side, the Warriors, they have a vision. They know what they're doing going into this offseason. Now, that's all we have today for Warriors Latest. As always, a big thanks to you guys for tuning in, liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell, as well as subscribing to our podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts these days. And if you have any thoughts on who the Warriors could pick up potentially in the draft, that would be a second-round pick and improve the team after they trade for Giannis and maybe even sign LeBron James. Feel free to comment below, as I love hearing your thoughts. And as always, go Dubs.